It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! And we start with hilarity. Momo is giving himself, oh, you're stopping now? The minute the camera turns on, you stop. Okay, Momo, you're going to unplug my microphone? Oh, he didn't do that yet. He did it earlier. Yeah, Momo was like giving himself a bath. You might have even heard the slurping when I started Feedback Friday. But, yeah, it is Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. And there's a lot of comments, obviously. I like to juxtapose topics in part so that I could see who clearly watched one video and not the other. And, you know, there are some choice cuts based on that. I try to be kind, but there will be times I'm going to giggle because, well, you'll see as I get into it. But really great feedback. There were a lot of private conversations, which I will not share, as well as public comments over the ongoing Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing. That's rocking a lot of people in the feels. And part of the reason I decided to do a video about it now is, you know, her side is still coming up. And that's gonna just be a shit show. So I wanted to get it out of the way and put my content out now. And I think it's interesting that a lot of the stuff I talked about on Monday came up in the trial as it went along. Terrible segue. I'm tired and punchy. But help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Monthly support is very important. Patreon.com/LeannaK. And there are going to be some really cool Patreon perks coming down the pipe with some projects that I will talk about next week. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for somebody who can use it and can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Leanna Cares continues to be a super rewarding service. I do still have some spots. So people are starting to refer people now. It's really cool. It's like, all right, sweet. You know someone feels like something is helpful when they refer a friend. So that's really cool. But let's get to your comments. We're going to start with the Johnny Depp stuff. And there were a lot of comments on these videos. I had trouble picking. If I had 3 hours to just sit here and read comments this week, I could do it. But let's just dive in. Oh boy, you hit the nail on the head with the statement on victim blaming sometimes feeling worse than the abuse itself. I've often found that the way people react when you tell them ends up unintentionally revealing a lot about how they think of you or the world as a whole. Well-meaning but insensitive statements like, maybe you're remembering it wrong, or maybe it didn't happen that way, gives the impression that they condescendingly think of you as incapable of knowing your own mind. Or else, the aggressive defensive victim blaming, listing everything good the abuser has done, implies they think X amount of good gives them free rein to treat people badly. It's why when the pro wrestling speaking out allegations exploded in 2020, I ultimately decided not to name my bullies abusers or do the Rose McGowan thing. Partly because the idea of Twitter dogpiling you with the "you deserved it, it wasn't bad as X, you did this thing that meant you asked for it" does not sound remotely pleasant. I got lucky that mine either left the industry, got named already, or appeared to have reformed. I think I came out on the other end realizing the universal validation from the public was not as important as that own personal validation, where you can stop saying to yourself, if I hadn't done X or Y, then maybe it wouldn't have happened, and instead say, you know what else would have prevented it? If the other person hadn't been abusive. Well said. I personally believe Johnny Depp, and a verdict isn't likely to change that. And in reality, neat, happy endings aren't easily found. If Amber is found not guilty, his path to healing will be a lot harder, but it'll still be hard even if she's put away. There's actually an Angel episode that touches on this. Ironic, considering the creator, where a policewoman says that they can put a stalker behind bars, but that won't stop him invading his victim's mind for years after the fact in her dreams and thoughts. And that's something she has to work on. And I found that one thing that gives me the strength to withstand the nastier bits of victim blaming is having the chance to say, yeah, this happened to even one person and not have it invalidated. So much truth. I just, winced at the Joss Whedon reference. You guys know why. And yeah, a lot of truth there. I'll leave it there because I'll just spend all my time agreeing with what this commenter said. So I will say to this commenter, I believe you. I'm sorry that happened to you. You're right. It wasn't your fault. Abusers abuse. You could have done nothing to stop it. I am very glad you're beginning the journey of healing. One note, it's a civil trial, not a criminal trial. I notice a lot of people are using the terminology of guilty and not guilty, and so I just want to clarify that. It's... Don't judge, Cthulhu. I love that. I love where Cthulhu is now. Yeah, just wanted to make that clear because that is a common thing. Moving on. Don't start punching unless you can pull those punches as soon as you're able. I love this. I'm going to teach it to my children. Something I said is going to be taught to children. Right, Momo? Right. Another person said, it's astonishing to realize how far Solomon Justice Walker has come from the initial caricature of online outrage warrior we saw on Lady Bits. And I just saw that comment and I sat back. It's like, yeah. I mean, both Solomon and Princess Sparkle Muffin were attended as one-offs that were just popular. Solomon was created as a foil for Beelzebub to do a very non-politically correct striptease style thing and then do a Mortal Kombat finisher. But yeah, they both just, some characters are like that. I mean, Harley Quinn in Batman was intended as a one-off, right? I'm not comparing my work to Batman, but just saying, yes, Solomon has come a long way. And it's always very validating. I put this up on Twitter that, you know, whenever a guy tells me he relates to Solomon, or, you know, Solomon was me when I was younger, or we all are Solomon or Noah Solomon, it's just magic to me. It's like this really cool human condition moment. Because one of the things I did with Solomon's backstory is certain things I came up with things that were deliberately absurd parodies of stuff that happens in social justice communities. And I have since been told that actually happens. So you want to know there's a problem in a movement, that's a good sign. And this is why comedy and the right to defend should be protected. Okay, moving on. Thank you for the compliment. I'd say to anyone dealing with abuse to try and reach out to somebody they can trust or a therapist. People with introvert tendencies and people with higher levels of empathy tend to feel like they are betraying someone when talking about their issues that involve someone else, even when talking about abusive or potentially abusive behavior. It's okay to feel protective of someone you care about and admit there are abusive things happening. It's also okay. That's why it's important to find another person to be that understanding wall to bounce thoughts off of. And for those of people in your life struggling like that, just keep at it, listening and reassuring that it's okay. Yeah, that was a really good comment. And it is very true that a lot of people, they feel bad when other people feel bad and they don't want to betray a trust, right? Or ruin someone's life, so on and so forth. But you do have to talk about it. And listening is an incredibly undervalued skill. We focus a lot on talking. There's so much talking in text and in voice and in whatever, public, private. There's so much talking. Listening, on the other hand, is at a premium. And I do try to listen, which is part of the reason I do Feedback Fridays. It is an excuse for me to go through comments and actually, first of all, it's a reason to read them, which when people know their comments are going to be read, I find it results in higher quality comments, even when they're critical. You know, there's very little shit posting that goes on. There's not a lot of trolling. Even the people that are really critical and don't get what I'm saying, I really do think are coming at it mostly in good faith. Like most people are in good faith. And that's really good. That's really precious. And I'm really appreciative of that. And listening is important. There's a phrase in sewing, you know, when you're cutting fabric, measure twice, cut once. I know construction as well, but I believe in listen twice before you speak once. That's just one of my little aphorisms. Somebody else said, your comment about Johnny Depp's chances in court are really important. I've seen the fallout when people get too involved in a court case and their side loses. Even at their best, court cases are a blunt instrument. As for myself, I'm not paying too much attention. I made up my mind when I heard Amber say, I didn't punch you, I hit you. All I can do is boycott her stuff. In other news, I finished Alan Wake. It took a bit to get into it, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you, commenter. Yay! Another Alan Wake fan. Yay! I love Alan Wake, and I'm so happy there's another game coming. Yay, yay, yay. Okay. Another tons of Johnny Depp comments. The thing with the Johnny Depp case is it's amazing how quick some in the media were to believe he was an abuser. It's not just the addiction thing either. It's the fact that he's almost entirely blind in one eye and needs glasses for the other. He basically has no depth perception and no one brought it up. Amber Heard was out there on how he attacked her and punched her, etc., etc. Knowing someone in real life who's basically almost as blind in one eye but with good sight in the other, and dude has issues with depth perception and accuracy. It's highly doubtful Depp could actually accurately strike anyone and would only be able to hit with wild, wide swings in the rough direction. I didn't know that about, I haven't looked it up, I haven't verified it, I'm taking the commenter's word for it. But there are a lot of things about the whole story that tripped my spidey sense when it originally happened back in the day. Those of you who have been watching this channel for a while, I did content when the original allegations happened. I did content when the original trial in England happened, because even then I was like, this is a real uphill climb. And so I wanted to sort of plant a flag. I do this with some things that I actually feel, no, I'm right here. I'll say something when it's unpopular and I'll get yelled at and quasi-canceled. And then later, when it turns out I'm right, the people that attacked me don't care. They will not admit they were wrong. But it does show that I am willing to pick certain hills that I'm willing to die on, because I think it's important to show you're willing to take risks when you believe in something, so that when something else comes up, people know you're arguing in good faith, because we're all wrong, right? On certain things. We're all wrong, right? We all are mistaken about certain opinions. No one's right all the time. And everybody only has a piece of it. So I do think it's interesting. I do think it's really important to eat some shit so that later on you can go, hey, I have been consistent on this issue. And so, like I said, this is a really good comment, and I don't think this one's a disagreement. I think it's just adding here. Well, I get the reasoning behind the issue with mutual abuse. The reasoning only holds if we assume power dynamics are static and or unidirectional, which frequently isn't the case, because if the power dynamics aren't static and or unidirectional, then even if we factor them in, it would be possible for both parties to abuse the other. That said, a more accurate term may be reciprocal and or cyclical abuse, as mutual can be inferred to be equal and or simultaneous. Reciprocal and cyclical would better reflect the more dynamic nature of such things. And yes, I think reciprocal, cyclical, there is some of that going on with the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing. They were bad for each other. And, you know, one thing I give him real credit for is he's coming out there and he's saying certain things that make him look bad. You know, yeah, I did cocaine. Yeah, I did this. Yeah, we drank, you know. Yeah, I didn't tell the truth about what happened to my finger, you know. He's not, if he's shading, he's doing, and yes, he is an actor, but some actors are not good at ad-libbing. Now, he is. He's had very charming moments on the stand, so I'm trying to take this with a grain of salt, but, you know, if he's shading, it comes across to me as kind of mild shading. And the difference here, yes, there was probably cycles of back and forth. He said some awful things to her. He admits that at one point he, had a breakdown and wrote words on the wall in his own blood. But after it was over, she did things to harm his reputation. Even though he has kids that are impacted by this stuff, he did not do that to her. He was prepared to move on and get on with his life. She was not. And I do think that matters. And to me, even if we accept, they did shitty things to each other, one of them accepted that and was willing to just move on. The other wouldn't let it go and went after the reputation of someone at one point that they loved. For, as it's come out, very little good reason if she was truly being accountable for her part in the whole thing. Just saying, right? Okay. So, moving on to the video about feminism. And this is where I was just tickled by some of the comments that obviously found the video via some sort of YouTube algorithm or posting on a subreddit or something like that and didn't see the Johnny Depp video the day before. I'll read the comment and you can figure out where I'm getting with this, okay? Came back and watched the rest of your video and where you got was surprising. I want to encourage you to keep looking at the idea of us all being human. The idea of inclusivity and recognizing each of us has our own history, starting disadvantages, trials, opportunities, and talents. That's not linked to race or gender. I thought, all right, this is a very nice comment. Left turn at Albuquerque. Your approach and opinions all the way are preconceived in a men did this to women. Women are worst off. At best, they're arguable. Most of them are judgmental, particularly of motive, whereas unbiased observation would include differently. Didn't see the Johnny Depp video. That's the feminist training again. If you are going to approach this inclusively, you're going to need to drop that prejudice. And this is the moment I go, he don't know me too well, do he? Right? Okay. I don't know if it's a he. That was just the quote. The second thing you might consider is not that men feel left out. They are left out. Objectively, men are worse off than women in the modern world. Please ask for evidence. Yet feminists continue to focus on women's issues. I'm just... Manly Mondays. Okay. For example, men are far more likely to be victims of violence and more severe violence. I have quoted that statistic in the past, commenter. We spend billions on programs to stop violence against women, but ignore violence against men. Ineffectual programs because they used false feminist reasoning, whereas a broader assessment would provide a real understanding of the causes of violence, including violence against women. That's a really sweeping generalization that I'm not going to touch. A working man working 12-hour days, literally in a coal mine, never seeing his kids, earning a pittance that is appropriated by his wife, does have a shitty deal. All men being vilified and hated in public is a thing. Teaching boys that they are toxic and abusers is a thing. They're things that would not be tolerated by feminists' treatment of women. Telling men they're just reactionary, just feeling threatened or left out is ridiculous. I never said that. This brings to the fore that you obviously do not understand men's issues. Outrage! It is really good that you are asking and investigating and trying to understand, but perhaps a less matronly, lecturing tone and more inquiring approach. You certainly need to do more research on men's issues to understand them. So far, your approach is superficial at addressing only some minor symptoms. Again, the feminist lens limits your ability to consider. I can't help being frustrated and annoyed by your approach, prejudice, and the things you say, but I generally think you're onto a good thing and should continue with working to a more inclusive approach by feminism and yourself. That was good for me. Was it good for you? Matronly! Interesting word choice. All right. Moving on. This is a more okay. this was a very long comment and I had to pare it down. So some of it, I hope I didn't strip the context out of, but it was a very long comment, but I thought there was some interesting things that I want to address because they didn't use the words like matronly and do research. Leanna's attempt at finding a definition for wokeness ended up at progressivism that's actually bigotry. Well, it felt close. It also felt like something was missing, as well as the feeling that the problem dated back before the movie, TV, game, culture wars. Again, I'm not sure what that means, but it's fair to say, okay, I feel like something's missing. I like this kind of feedback. And I think it is highly tied to the integration of Marxism into the activist movements that comprise the culture wars. Aside from the problems of how badly and horribly Marxism has failed in the real world, its use in current activism appears to be heavily predicated on something that, from the classic liberal viewpoint, appears to be unrestrained bigotry, hatred, and intolerance for any sort of ideological opponents or criticism, and the way Marxists behave when they gain power leave people feeling extremely wary of their agendas. So those who call out and denigrate wokeness reject the underlying Marxist principles by which these ideologues are pushing their agendas and the behavior that goes with it, which leads back to feminism. As you, not me, the royal you, progress through the different waves of feminism, you get more and more and more pushback corresponding to the amount of Marxism built into that wave's ideology. And like woke was described as progressivism that's actually bigotry, the denigration of the term feminism seems to be rooted in feminism that's actually Marxism. Of course, there are a lot of feminist variants: first wave feminism, second wave feminism, third wave feminism, radical feminism, trans-exclusionary radical feminism, and so forth. And then the denigrating terms such as feminazi, with the irony that the term Nazi has now been co-opted by Marxist ideologues as a broad insult against the right-wing groups that used them originally. I will add, not just right-wing, anybody that some asshole on Twitter disagrees with. So when the question is asked about whether the term feminism is still useful, one must also ask, what type of feminism are you talking about? Are you talking about feminism with or without the Marxist underpinnings? Has it been so tainted by its association with Marxism that you can no longer separate out the original feminist pursuits? Has it become the same sort of mask that created the term wokeness as a descriptor for progressive activism? There's a strong indicator that that's the case, yet at the same time, most people want to believe in the ideals that feminism ostensibly espouses. I believe in feminism, but I'm not a feminist type of self-descriptor, because being a feminist means aligning yourself with an unpleasant Marxist movement rather than being an advocate for women. Now, the one thing I will add as a historical point, and this is not to criticize the commenter, it's just accuracy and facts matter, is the first wave feminists in the UK, all the way back there, the Pankhursts actually met with Frederick Engels. Like, there is a direct connection to the British suffrage movement and Marxism. Engels went out there and sold Marxism. And this is part of the reason everything went wonky, because instead of class being class and the original Marxist thing of, well, it's all about class, Engels went out and started selling it to these different groups. You get a class, you get a class, you get a class, long before Oprah did it, right? And one of the groups he sold "You Are an Oppressed Class" to is the wives of landowners in the UK. And that's part of the reason things are so weird. So it is not that certain types of feminism have become interwoven with Marxism. They always were. Now, that is separate from what was going on in Canada and the US at the time, where a lot of the feminism at the time, the suffrage and whatnot, actually came out of the revivalist religious movement and Quaker meetings. It was a completely different route. So even from the beginning, there were different groups with different tactics, all kind of go in for the same basic things, but the roots and the tactics were not the same. And this is why I try to go easy on talking about Marxism, because people don't like talking about Marxism. I like talking about ideas, not the speakers of the ideas. Just because someone is a Marxist does not mean they are always wrong. Does that mean I think they're more often wrong than they're right? Yes, I do. But I do not want to judge. I don't want to do what that sort of stereotypical Marxist route does, which is, oh, you are blank identity, therefore you must believe this, therefore I'm not going to listen to anything you say. To me, it's more, is this a good idea? Does this person seem to be coming at me in good faith, like I said earlier? If so, I don't really care what their ideology is. If they start trying to convert me, well, then that's not cool, and I'm going to set a boundary. But I don't get down in that identitarian muck, because to me, that's just not being the change you want to see. So, I mean, like I said, I thought it was well argued and clearly in good faith. And so I just wanted to issue that kind of clarification. And so we're going to end with a question. One comment and one question, the commenter said, because, I don't want to end on criticisms. That's weird. As many others here, I think that the term feminism has too many potential meanings and implications, some of which contradict each other. That's why in any given discussion, I don't take the label because I don't know what it means to the people in front of me, and because it might come with an expectation of agreement. That is, if you're really a feminist, then you must think that blah. On the topic of gender, I do get why it's a particularly important characteristic to focus on from a historical traditional perspective, which still has big consequences today, obviously. But it seems to me that it's more than that, and that many consider it as an intrinsically special part of one's identity, which confuses me. So here's a question that might help me understand. From this perspective of, say, the 5 genders approach, is there a useful distinction between gender and broad personality type? I struggle to see the difference. Very, very good question, because just going to wipe Momo's nose here. Momo's sick again. These terms do get interchanged a lot. Performance, personality type, gender identity. Gender performance, gender role, and gender identity are not the same thing. Behavior types are not the same thing. I much prefer professionally, like when I work with clients, I much prefer dealing in personality types instead of male, female demographics, because, as I teach when I lecture at colleges, 1 in 4 people aren't sex typical. So if you go, oh, you're a woman, you must like this. Oh, if you're a man, you must like this. Well, you're going to go really wide afield. I mean, I'm like that, right? With Google, remember that thing where they skew ads with Google? Google thought I was like a 25-year-old dude just because of my interests in my search. And, it's a fair thing to find this really confusing. And that's why I talk about it so much. Not because I'm trying to convert anyone to an opinion. I'm trying to cultivate understanding here. So if a couple people feel more secure in their understanding of the issue, that is my attempt here. In my matronly, annoying tone. I'm sorry, that's funny. But yeah, is there a useful distinction between gender and broad personality type? With the 5 genders approach. For people who don't know what this commenter is talking about, the 5 genders approach, that's what I subscribe to. I didn't come up with it. It's practiced by a lot of indigenous groups where gender is based on biology plus social role. So there's, men who do men's roles, men who do women's roles, straight up what we would call intersex or two-spirit. Now, 3 categories here are two-spirit categories, but straight up, like right down the middle, space for intersex people. And then there's women who have the roles of women and women who have the roles of men. That's essentially it. What that translates in more modern parlance is cis men, trans men, intersex, cis women, trans women. They are different experiences, and every experience deserves to be validated. Now, again, the problem with the trans cis dichotomy is it's still not safe in a lot of places to be out as a trans person. There is a lot of bigotry and discrimination and outright politicians in multiple countries are actively discriminating against trans people. Gay bashing is coming back. I can't believe it. It's the freaking 90s all over again. And I end up kind of despairing and start thinking, wow, did all that stuff we did back then, you know, all the sweat and all the tears and all the sometimes blood, is it all being undone? And I remind myself, no, this is just what happens. There are backlashes. How, and here's the answer to the question, and I'm going to try to make it as succinct as possible. I just, like everything else I talk about, I have to do 5 minutes of setup for 1 minute of explanation. It is the burden. But gender identity is when you just think about yourself. You know, I try to describe it as when you look at a man, does that read as same or different? When you look at a woman, does that read as same or different? Right? Some people, that is a very strong, innate, I am a man or I am a woman. And they are proud of that, right? They do. This is me. I'm proud of who I am. I like who I am. The number of women who tell me I like girly things. I don't like that being demonized. And that is completely valid. To me, girly stuff is costume. It is a performance. It is not an extension of my identity. But for some women, it very much is. And then you have drag performers who, of course, go whole hog. I mean, oh my God. Some drag queens I've met in person must think I'm so weird because I'm just staring at their makeup because it's freaking flawless, right? I'm looking to steal technique. And other people, I mean, they feel very connected to being a man, right? Some people feel so connected to that they need to change their, you know, their endocrine system and their body to be that because that feels right to them. And other people, you know, they're born that way and they want male typical or masculine typical stuff to not be demonized either. And this is why we get into these knee-jerk reactions to gendered slurs, you know, and the gray area of toxic masculinity, you know, of people having a very different interpretation of what that means. Some people thinking it's a broad brush that attacks traditional masculinity. And, you know, I talk about this all the time. Which traditional masculinity are you referring to? Are you talking to the traditional masculinity of the ancient Greeks where men cried in public and it was not a problem? Are you talking about the traditional masculinity of the war era of sort of clean cut, yes ma'am, no ma'am, drink the milk, keep calm and carry on? You know, like Steve Rogers, Captain America kind of thing? Or are you talking about the post-Vietnam hyper masculine, but also deconstructionist masculine self analysis that, you know, we see in the Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Beefcake Cinema era, and it's all kind of getting merged together with superhero stuff right now. You can find bits of kind of all those masculinities. Which one's traditional? And this is why I reject these terms, right? It's like, what do you mean? Please define. And for me, if I'm talking to somebody one-on-one, I will accept any definition there. What I will not accept is it is somehow noble for an okay and something to aspire to for men to make themselves sick or women to make themselves sick to put food on the table and a roof over their family's head. I will fight that no matter where it is, when people start doing things that are self-destructive, that's when I'm going to say something, because that's not a healthy tradition. It may be a tradition in a great many families, and I'm really disturbed by the fact that so many people seem to think that it is somehow noble to kill yourself through your job. Fuck. Like, that's not me making fun. That's me being really concerned. I don't know what to do about that. That is so ingrained. Jordan Peterson was going off on that the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, will someone please help that man? He is clearly in serious distress. And see, there's an example of nobody cares about men. Nobody cares about men. Men are in trouble. Nobody cares. That's just not true. And I want radicals of all stripes to not be the dominant voice in these things, right? There's a lot of things that certain forms of feminism, especially the more Marxist forms of feminism, pump out that are just not true about women. At least, not true across the board. And just not true about men. The idea that men are all closet predators or women have certain sex-based rights. Sex-based rights drives me crazy. But, then there's the other side where the far right are taking frightened, angry, understandably, that is not an insult, lost people and filling their heads full of crap as well. And people get this lens on the world, and then they can't see the data that contradicts that lens. And that's what has me really concerned. I sit here, there's all this outpouring of support for Johnny Depp this week. And yet people are still saying no one cares about men when they're hurt and abused. He is being a freaking brave guy in only the way Johnny Depp, walking performance art man, can do. He is being brave, and he is letting it all hang out to show through performance that people do give a shit. And yes, he's a celebrity and all that stuff, but still, people care. People freaking care. He's living proof. People do care about men when they are victimized and they are abused. Not everybody, but not everybody cares about anything. How do we get people to stop believing that no one cares? Because that is brainworms. That is a trap. It's not true. And if you believe it's true, you're not going to be able to see the people that do give a shit. Like, I've said, someone please help Jordan Peterson. People are like, oh, I know you don't like him. No, I think the guy needs help instead of attention. That's not disliking the guy. I am bothered that there is no one around that guy who maybe he will listen to, but certainly gives enough of a rat's ass to do anything about that. That bothers me. And of course, he's out there saying men break their backs and disposabilities, making this connection to masculinity. Can we please all stop this? Can we please all stop this? Because gender identity is real. Personality characteristics that are not considered typical of, broad personality types that are the minority within a particular gender identity. Those are real too. And just because you're a man doesn't mean you have to have typically manly traits. And just because you're a woman, doesn't mean you have to have all the typical female traits. They're different. And people have the right to individuate and say, I am this, I think this, I like this, and have all those parts be valid, whatever the combination they are. That's where we have to get to. So hopefully that made sense. I will stop there because we went really long. Like I said, a lot of really good comments. looking forward to your feedback on this. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for somebody who can use it who can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.